Prepare to be captivated by stunning geological clues that bring epic biblical tales to life. From the fiery destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah to the crumbling walls of Jericho, we'll uncover how massive tectonic upheaval in the Levant shaped these legendary stories of catastrophic ruin. Blending geology with gripping archaeological discoveries, this presentation will reveal the earth-shaking forces behind the Bible's most dramatic events. The Bible stories of Sodom and Gomorrah and Jericho are most probably based on real events that can be explained by geological and archaeological data. The Mediterranean region is influenced by four key tectonic plates: the African plate, Eurasian plate, Arabian plate, and the Anatolian plate. African plate is slowly moving northward. It is subducting beneath the Eurasian and Anatolian plates, causing earthquakes and mountain formation. Eurasian plate covers most of Europe. Its interaction with the African plate creates seismic activity and geological features like the Alps. Arabian plate is located to the east. It contributes to tectonic movements affecting the eastern Mediterranean. Anatolian plate, a crucial microplate in the eastern Mediterranean, plays a major role in seismic activity near Greece and Turkey. These plates shape the Mediterranean region's landscape, driving the formation of mountains, islands, and seismic hotspots. Israel and Jordan lie on a major plate boundary known as the Dead Sea Transform Fault. It is one of the most active plate boundaries on Earth. This major geological fault system, extending for about 1,000 kilometers, marks the boundary where the Arabian plate is moving northward relative to the African plate. This movement is primarily a left lateral strike-slip motion, meaning the plates slide past each other horizontally. However, there's also an extensional component that has created significant topographical features, most notably the Jordan Rift Valley, which includes the lowest point on Earth's dry land. The Dead Sea itself, a pull-apart basin formed by this tectonic activity. The constant grind of these colossal tectonic plates makes the region highly seismically active, leading to frequent earthquakes. The Dead Sea Transform Fault has a history of destructive earthquakes, documented in biblical and historical records and archaeological evidence. It is along this plate boundary that many famous biblical events have occurred. The term Levant has been used for centuries to describe the region in the eastern Mediterranean, including modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and parts of Turkey, and often includes the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. This is due to its geographical proximity and historical connections as a land bridge between Africa and Asia, and its role in the ancient and modern history of the Eastern Mediterranean. Historically, the Levant has been recognized as a crossroads of civilizations dating back to ancient times. The region has been inhabited since pre-Neolithic times, with early agrarian cultures emerging around 15,000 BCE, known as the Natufians. Throughout history, it has been home to various civilizations, including the Canaanites, Phoenicians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, and later Islamic empires. The Dead Sea Fault is a major tectonic boundary between the African and Arabian plates, stretching from the Red Sea through the Dead Sea and into Syria. Its seismic activity has shaped the dramatic landscape of the region, including the Jordan Rift Valley. Many key biblical events occurred in the vicinity of this fault zone. The fault's geologic dynamism adds a layer of realism to these ancient stories, grounding legendary catastrophes in the region's active and volatile earth. We will investigate some of these biblical legends in this presentation. Let's look at the Dead Sea area and its general tectonics. The movements along this major fault have affected the history of the region and is documented in the Bible. The land on either side of the Dead Sea is slowly sliding past each other along a major crack in the Earth's crust called the Dead Sea Fault Zone. Imagine two giant pieces of a puzzle, the Arabian Plate and the African Plate, grinding horizontally past each other. This movement, known as left lateral strike slip, means that if you stood on one side, the other side would appear to be moving to your left. This grinding motion is very slow, typically only 4 to 6 millimeters, about the thickness of a few pennies, per year. Even though it's slow, this constant stress builds up over time, eventually releasing as earthquakes, some of which have been quite strong throughout history. Over millions of years, this steady, subtle shift has caused the land on either side of the fault to move a remarkable distance, with the Arabian Plate having slid about 105 kilometers, roughly 65 miles, northward relative to the African Plate. The Dead Sea area is a pull-apart basin, and the Sea of Galilee, Lake Kinneret, is as well, but a smaller version. The Sea of Galilee is a freshwater lake. In fact, it's the largest freshwater lake in Israel. It is fed mainly by the Jordan River and rainfall, and has historically been a key water source for the region. The Dead Sea, on the other hand, is not freshwater. It is a hypersaline lake, meaning it has extremely high salt content, about 10 times saltier than the ocean. This makes it one of the saltiest bodies of water on Earth, and nothing can live in it, hence the name Dead Sea. Humans can effortlessly float on the surface of the Dead Sea due to its extraordinarily high salinity. The extreme concentration of dissolved salts and minerals makes the water incredibly dense, significantly denser than the human body. As a result, the water exerts a powerful upward buoyant force that easily supports a person, making it nearly impossible to sink and offering a unique sensation of weightlessness. Dead Sea is known in Arabic as the Sea of Lot. In this picture, you can see massive salt beds on the shore of the Dead Sea. The shores of the Dead Sea are indeed characterized by extensive salt deposits and formations, resembling salt flats. This unique landscape is a direct consequence of the Dead Sea being a lake with no outlet, combined with the region's extremely arid climate. As water evaporates at a rapid rate under the intense desert sun, the highly concentrated minerals and salts are left behind, precipitating out of the water and accumulating along the receding shorelines and lake bed. The continuous evaporation has led to a significant decrease in the Dead Sea's volume, exposing vast areas that were once submerged and now reveal these striking, often surreal, salt-laden landscapes. Dead sea level fluctuated significantly in biblical historic times, approximately 210 feet 60 meters, indicating significant climatic changes. The Dead Sea's water level has naturally fluctuated throughout history, with geological evidence showing both periods of significant expansion during wet eras and near drying during severe droughts, such as those potentially reflected in biblical accounts. However, the alarming and rapid decline witnessed since the 1960s is predominantly human-induced. Extensive diversion of water from the Jordan River and its tributaries for agriculture and domestic use by surrounding nations, coupled with water loss to mineral extraction operations, has drastically reduced inflow. This imbalance between water entering and water evaporating has caused the Dead Sea to shrink by over a meter annually, exposing vast salt flats and leading to the formation of numerous sinkholes along its retreating shores. "70,000 to 15,000 years ago, Lake Lisan covered the entire Dead Sea Valley and was up to 280 meters, 919 feet, above the present Dead Sea surface. Lake Lisan was less salty. As late as 15,000 years ago, Lake Lisan occupied a larger part of the valley, unlike the small portion that the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea cover today. Lake Lisan began a rapid and dramatic decline, especially between 14,000 and 13,000 years before present, marking a significant hydrological shift towards drier conditions. Lake Lisan, the ancient lake that occupied the Dead Sea Valley, began to dry up around 14,000 to 13,000 years ago, during the transition from the last glacial maximum to the warmer Holocene period. This drying process was gradual, driven by climatic changes, including rising temperatures and reduced precipitation in the region. By around 11,000 years ago, Lake Lisan had significantly receded, eventually shrinking into the modern Dead Sea. Natufian Neolithic man inhabited the Lake Lisan area during 14,500 to 11,500 BP. BP means before the present period, not a BP gas station. Neolithic period, New Stone Age, is a period when civilizations changed their cultural form from nomadic to sedentary settlements. In particular, this included the use of wild and domestic crops and of domesticated animals. This was happening in the Levant from 14,500 to 11,500 BP during the Natufian settlements. The Natufians planted hundreds of kinds of cereals, fruits, and nuts, which have been found in the Levant. The Natufian period was not the dry, barren, and thorny landscape of today, but rather a well-watered woodland. As Lake Lisan began to dry up around 14,000 to 13,000 years ago due to climatic shifts at the end of the last glacial maximum, the Natufians in the Levant adapted to the changing environment in diverse ways. Natufians moved north and east when Lake Lisan began to dry up, while the Harifians who evolved from the Natufians moved south. In the more arid steppe grassland regions, such as parts of modern-day Jordan and Syria, many Natufians abandoned their semi-sedentary lifestyles and returned to a more mobile hunter-gatherer existence. This shift, particularly evident during the Younger Dryas, circa 10,800 to 9,500 BC, allowed them to track dwindling resources like wild game and plants, as shown by archaeological evidence of increased mobility and reduced site occupation in the late Natufian period. The Harifians in the Negev and northern Sinai disappeared as a distinct culture due to increasing aridification that made their arid environment unsustainable. Let's fast forward to about 4,200 years ago, 7,000 plus years after the Natufian civilization was in its heyday. The 4,200 BP event was a significant climate shift that had profound impacts on several major civilizations across the Mediterranean and Near East. These societies, largely dependent on stable agricultural systems and centralized political structures, experienced widespread disruption. The Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia is a prime example, suffering from severe drought and agricultural failure that contributed to its collapse. A period of famine and chaos documented in both archaeological evidence and ancient texts. Old Kingdom Egypt also faced a period of decline known as the First Intermediate Period. This era was marked by political fragmentation and societal stress directly linked to reduced Nile floods, which in turn were caused by diminished monsoon rains. Similarly, the Harappan civilization in the Indus Valley, though geographically distinct, experienced a substantial decline in its urban centers and a shift towards smaller rural settlements. This decline is attributed to weakening monsoon systems and river drying, which severely disrupted their agricultural and trade networks. Beyond these major empires, numerous city-states in the Levant and eastern Mediterranean, including regions like modern-day Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon, also saw declines or outright abandonment of settlements. This climatic change period is also attributed to the famous demise of the Mycenaean culture in Crete. The dry period 4200 BP in the Levantine area lasted about 200 years. This dry period led to the collapse of major civilizations in the Mediterranean and Middle East. Here is a close-up of the dry period 4000 to 4200 BP in the Dead Sea area. And now the biblical story of Abraham and Lot, their migration to the Promised Land, and Sodom and Gomorrah. The biblical account of Abraham and Lot finding a well-watered Jordan plain aligns best with the period 4000 to 3800 before present, when Dead Sea levels rose as shown on the diagram, and the Levant became lush due to increased rainfall. Earlier periods, 4300 to 4000 before present, were too arid to match the description, suggesting the migration likely occurred after the 4.2 thousand events impact subsided in the Mesopotamian region. This discrepancy that we find in modern scientific times should not influence the significance of the legend. The Bible's primary purpose is not to be a literal timekeeper, but rather to convey theological truths through narratives rich with allegory and symbolic meaning. Who were Abraham and Lot, and where and when did they live? Abraham was the first of the Hebrew patriarchs. Lot was his nephew. Abraham was told by God to leave Ur of the Chaldeans and travel to Shechem in Canaan, modern-day Nablus, the Promised Land. Abraham is estimated to have lived approximately 4,000 to 3,800 years before present, several centuries after the 4,200 years before present dry period. Abraham settled in Hebron, and Lot settled further south because their flocks were too large to remain in the same place. What did Abraham and Lot see over the valley of Sodom? According to Genesis 13, Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was watered like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Genesis 13:10. The Jordan Valley with the river Jordan provided irrigation for the plain around Sodom. The Jordan River had created a lush oasis in what now is a forbidding desert. The location of Lot's cities of the plains are thought to have been in the southeast portion of the Dead Sea in modern-day Jordan. What happened at Sodom and Gomorrah? The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is believed to have occurred during Abraham's lifetime, after Lot had settled in the area of the cities of the plains. According to the Bible story, angels visited Lot in the city of Sodom, and they warned him to leave with his family because God was going to destroy the city for its evil ways. God rained down burning fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah. The precise locations of the biblical cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, and Zoar, 3 of the 5 cities of the plain, remain a subject of debate among archaeologists and biblical scholars, but general consensus places them in the vicinity of the Dead Sea. 2 main theories contend. One places them in the southern plain of the Dead Sea, often identifying sites like Babij Dra and Numera as possible candidates for Sodom and Gomorrah, respectively, with Zoar to their south. The other prominent theory, gaining recent attention, places the cities of the plain in the northern plain of the Dead Sea, specifically identifying Tel El Hammam in Jordan as another candidate for Sodom, with other nearby tells potentially representing the other destroyed cities. As of yet, no definitive, universally accepted identification has been made for Sodom, Gomorrah, or Zoar. The angel warned them not to look back as they were fleeing. Lot requested to flee to a small town named Zoar. But Lot's wife looked back and was transformed into a pillar of salt. Let's take some geological understanding of this occurrence. Earthquakes in the region may have released natural gas or ignited bitumen and sulfur-rich materials. A massive earthquake could explain the fire and brimstone destruction in Genesis 19. The area sits along the Dead Sea Transform Fault, which has produced powerful earthquakes throughout history. The biblical legend of Sodom and Gomorrah describes these cities being destroyed by fire and brimstone, a vivid image of burning sulfur raining down from the sky as divine punishment for wickedness. This dramatic depiction has fascinated scholars for centuries, and modern research suggests it is rooted in real natural phenomena. The region around the Dead Sea is rich in natural sulfur deposits and bitumen, a petroleum-like substance, which can ignite under certain conditions, producing flames, smoke, and the distinctive smell of sulfur. Additionally, the area's tectonic activity causes gas emissions from hot springs and fumaroles, which can sometimes ignite, creating fiery and smoky displays that mirror the fire and brimstone imagery. Mount Sodom is a salt diapir outcropping on the surface of the Dead Sea. Mount Sodom, a salt ridge rising over 200 meters along the southwestern shore of the Dead Sea in Israel, lies in a geologically active, arid region shaped by tectonics and evaporation. Opposite it, across the Dead Sea, are Jordan's Moab Mountains, a high plateau. The southern Dead Sea basin, marked by seismic activity and past destruction layers, is often linked to the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Dead Sea area is a pull-apart basin in which deep salt layers form diapirs, as shown in the diagram. These salt diapirs rise and are injected into younger sediments. Mount Sodom is a good example of a large salt diapir on the surface of the Dead Sea. Shown here is a seismic cross-section of Mount Sodom. Mount Sodom, located near the Dead Sea, is primarily composed of salt and formed through salt diapirism, a process in which buoyant salt rises through denser rock layers due to tectonic activity. This geological phenomenon likely began hundreds of thousands of years ago, driven by movements in the Great Rift Valley. Research indicates that about 80% of the mountain's composition originates from ancient evaporated sea deposits. The visible part of the salt diapir extends deep underground up to 6,000 meters and is capped with limestone, clay, and conglomerate. The mountain is currently rising at 6 to 9 millimeters per year and is currently 200 meters above the Dead Sea surface. Due to its salt solubility, Mount Sodom features numerous caves, sinkholes, and karst formations. The pillar is named Lot's wife due to the biblical account in Genesis 19, where Lot's wife looks back at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, despite being warned not to do so, and is turned into a pillar of salt. The ancient writers Strabo and Josephus both connect the Dead Sea region to stories of divine destruction and natural phenomena. Strabo, a Greek geographer writing in the 1st century BCE, describes the Dead Sea, which he calls Lake Asphaltites, in his geography, noting its extreme salinity and the bitumen that floats on its surface. He references local traditions about the area being struck by divine catastrophe, possibly alluding to stories like Sodom and Gomorrah, though he does not explicitly mention Lot's wife. Similarly, the Jewish historian Josephus, in his Antiquities of the Jews, 1st century CE, explicitly links the Dead Sea to the biblical destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Another candidate for Lot's wife is pictured in the Mujib Nature Reserve, and there are plenty of others. The sulfurous hot springs near the Dead Sea have been revered for their therapeutic and mineral-rich waters since antiquity. The Mayan hot springs, one of the most prominent, was frequented by the Romans, Nabateans, and later civilizations who believed in its healing properties. Heated by underground volcanic activity, its waters, reaching 40 to 60 degrees Celsius, were used for medicinal purposes, attracting travelers and rulers alike. There are many bitumen asphalt pits in the Dead Sea area. Pliny, Strabo, and Dioscorides mention the importance of Judean bitumen for medicinal purposes and for waterproofing boats, etc. Asphalt was quarried in open-cast mining since 1600 BC. Pliny the Elder, in the 1st century AD, wrote that asphalt was found as an earth in the neighborhood of the seaside town of Sidon. The Jewish historian Josephus called the Dead Sea by its Greek name, Asphaltites. During the Bronze Age, the Dead Sea region was an important center of resource-based commerce, supplying unique materials highly valued in the ancient world. Chief among these was bitumen, naturally surfacing in the southern Dead Sea, which was widely used for waterproofing boats, construction, and mummification, particularly in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Salt was another key export prize for food preservation and ritual use. The region also had access to sulfur and mineral-rich clays, which were likely used for medicinal and cosmetic purposes. Settlements such as Bab-edh-Drah and Numeira on the southeastern shore show evidence of early urban planning and trade infrastructure, indicating active local economies tied to these resources. And archaeological sites such as Tol el-Hammam reflect this strategic importance, revealing signs of fortified urban centers that may have controlled trade along the eastern edge of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea area was also strategically located along major Bronze Age trade routes connecting Egypt, Canaan, Mesopotamia, and the Arabian Peninsula. Goods like copper from southern Jordan, textiles, pottery, and agricultural products likely moved through the region by land caravans. Oil and gas drilling location near Mount Sodom. In 1995, Israeli company Delek Group Limited struck oil in the Hatturim area. Here is a recap of the Bible facts regarding the Sodom and Gomorrah Bible story. Abraham and Lot found a well-watered plain, different climate at the time. Stories of destruction of several cities by earthquakes. Mention of many tar pits. Rain of sulfurous fire. Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt. Lot's escape to Zoar at the foothills of the Moab Mountains. An earthquake could result in the release of hydrocarbons from the ground, which might be ignited naturally or humanly induced, causing the aforementioned rains of fire and brimstone, sulfur, in the Bible legend. Let's fast forward to the Bible story of Jericho. Here is a quick recap of how Joshua and his troops captured Jericho. Joshua and his troops circled the walls of Jericho. The Israelites walked around the walls with the Ark of the Covenant once a day, then 7 times on day 7. On the 7th day, the troops blew trumpets of ram's horns and shouted to make the walls fall down. Joshua 6:14-15. Archaeological evidence from Tel es-Sultan and the site of ancient Jericho shows human settlement dating back to around 9,600 to 9,000 BP during the pre-pottery Neolithic period, making it one of the earliest known urban centers. Jericho's archaeological record reveals its origins as a significant Natufian settlement around 10,000 BCE, drawing early hunter-gatherer groups to its abundant spring before evolving into a permanent fortified city in the subsequent pre-pottery Neolithic A period. The walls of Jericho are thought to have been built about 8,000 BP. In biblical times, it was the strongest fortress in all of the land of Canaan. Jericho was built atop a great mound nearly 70 feet high. It is thought that it was built for protection and to prevent floods. While the Bronze Age destructions, particularly those dated to 3,550 BP or 3,400 BP, are the most frequently discussed in relation to historical and biblical narratives, they represent only part of the city's long and turbulent past. There is no single answer to when was Jericho destroyed, as it was a resilient settlement that rose and fell numerous times over its thousands of years of existence. The scientific and geological assessment of Jericho reveals a city profoundly shaped by its dynamic geological environment, particularly its susceptibility to earthquakes. The Dead Sea Fault, a major transform boundary between the African and Arabian plates, is the primary source of seismic activity in the Jordan Valley near Jericho, accommodating left lateral strike-slip motion. The interaction of this fault with others, like the Mount Carmel Fault, contributes to the region's complex tectonic setting and significant earthquake risk. The movements along these faults are shown in the diagram, with the Mount Carmel Fault movement about 1.9 millimeters per year and the major Dead Sea Fault varying between 3.14 millimeters per year in the vicinity of Jericho and 5 millimeters per year further south. Pictured here is Tel el-Sultan, the site of the old city of Jericho. The location of the settlement of Jericho. Let's summarize the key points about Jericho. Jericho lies at the intersection of two major faults, which created a number of significant springs in the area and are still used for agriculture. Natufians created irrigation systems, water cisterns, grain silos, etc. Bitumen and salt are plentiful in the vicinity that was useful for trade. Jericho had a strategic position to the major road to Damascus, King's Highway, and other Levantine routes. The Dead Sea region, along the Dead Sea Transform Fault, has experienced many 5.0 or higher magnitude earthquakes in recent history. One of the biggest of these was the 1927 Jericho earthquake, magnitude 6.3, which killed around 500 people and damaged cities like Jericho and Jerusalem. On July 27, 1927, a devastating 6.3 magnitude earthquake hit the area. The 6.3 earthquake inflicted huge damage in Jerusalem and Jericho. The cities of Ramlah, Tiberias, and Nablus were all heavily damaged. Up to 500 died and 700 were injured. The Jordan River stopped flowing for 21 hours. Here are some pictures depicting the damage of the 1927 earthquake. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Bronze Age site of Jericho was damaged a number of times, probably by more than one earthquake of unknown location and magnitude. The Mount Carmel fault created an uplifted mountain chain. Mount Carmel is sacred and strategic location famous for its biblical story of Elijah, the formation of the Carmelite order, and the Baha'i faith. Mount Carmel is composed of limestone, which contains lots of caves of archaeological and biblical significance. According to Strabo, Mount Carmel continued to be a place of refuge until at least the 1st century. There are many references in the Bible of people and settlements being swallowed up. Here are just a few citations of such incidents. There are many sinkhole swarms along the Dead Sea, which formed as a direct consequence of its rapidly receding water level, which allows fresh water to dissolve a buried salt layer, causing the ground above to collapse. So it's no surprise that there are many biblical stories of people and areas being swallowed up. Today, as in biblical times, these sinkholes pose a significant threat to infrastructure, agriculture, and human safety in the region. Here is a movie of an aerial view of the sinkholes in the Dead Sea area. Here is a diagram explaining how sinkholes form. Sinkholes form when water dissolves soluble bedrock like limestone or salt, creating underground cavities. As the Dead Sea's water recedes, fresh groundwater dissolves exposed salt, forming voids. When the surface above these voids can no longer hold, it collapses, creating sinkholes. Factors like rain, earthquakes, or human activities like water diversion can speed up this process. The Bible stories of Sodom and Gomorrah and Jericho are most probably based on real events that can be explained by geological and archaeological data. Thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation on the intriguing geological evidence supporting some biblical stories and events. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel by pressing the subscribe and like buttons below. We are planning to add many more presentations covering a wide variety of science, history, and other enriching subjects. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to make them, and we will do our best to respond. Again, thanks for watching, and please do subscribe.